Hello, everyone, and welcome to Up the Turnpike, your source for New York Islanders content, both here on YouTube and over on Patreon. That's patreon.com/uptheturnpike, where you get podcasts twice a week, a dedicated Discord server, a Friday six-pack, and so much more, specifically during the season. So sign up today before the season starts in a few months from now. In today's video, what we're doing is looking at the top 5 best trades made by Garth Snow. I understand his tenure wasn't the greatest, and we're not going to relitigate whether it was good or not. That's not the point of this video. We're looking at the 5 best trades that he has made, or he did make, as GM of the New York Islanders. So without further ado, let's get into it. And I'm sure the first one that I'm going to name here is the first one that comes to mind for you, and that's the trade that Garth Snow made with the Edmonton Oilers and Peter Chiarelli, where he sent Griffin Reinhardt for a 2015 first and a 2015 second, which we later packaged with another second rounder to get Anthony Beauvillier. I'm lumping Bo together in this trade. I know we didn't draft him specifically with that second rounder, but we don't get Bo if we don't make this trade. Even if you just look at Matthew Barzal, it's a huge win. Even if you just look at that, but it's an even bigger win considering that we got Bo as well. But obviously, what happened here is that Peter Chiarelli wanted a stay-at-home defenseman. That's what he was looking for, right? And he thought he got one in Griffin Reinhardt. That's what he was hoping to get. Whereas the New York Islanders knew very well that's not what he was going to get. They knew. That's why they're trading him. They tried him. They seen him. They're like, we're good. We don't want to get it in the business of Griffin Reinhardt. Sorry, my dude. We're sending you over to Edmonton, who clearly want your shutdown capabilities. You're a homegrown-ish type of storyline too. Great. Good job. Send you over there. We'll take the 16th overall pick and a second rounder that we then again traded to move up into the first round again to draft Bo in the 28th slot. But we draft Matthew Barzal and Anthony Beauvillier. I don't even need to paint the picture, although I will in a second here, about how good of a trade that was for us. You already know. You already know how good of a player Matthew Barzal was. Won the Calder Trophy in his rookie year with the most points we've seen from a rookie in the last, I believe it's 10 years. So that in and of itself, massive, right? Remember, 85 points in 82 games for Matthew Barzal that season. Just absolutely electric. And then we have Beauvillier, who never really panned out to be a top 6 player, like a permanent top 6 player, but was definitely a middle 6 player and certainly very useful in the playoffs. A good NHLer in terms of a middle 6 type of guy, but sometimes that's what you get in the late first rounds, and that's still a win. And honestly, when you just look at how all those careers panned out between Griffin Reinhardt, Matthew Barzal, and Anthony Beauvillier, it's a clear win for the Islanders. They gained 650 points of production by drafting those two players. They gained 928 games of NHL experience by drafting those players. And for Beauvillier here, I didn't use any of his time with Vancouver, Chicago, or Nashville. That's just straight up stats with the Islanders. That's it. Whereas I didn't necessarily do that for some of these later evaluations when it came to players that were sent somewhere else. It just really got tricky. So I just stuck with what that player did after he left us and what we got, just us, when we traded for a player. So keep that in mind going forward. But obviously, clear win, right? Point differential, games played differential, heavily in our favor. The point differential was always going to be in our favor anyways, just because Griffin Reinhardt was going to be a shutdown defenseman. But it's that the games played are so well out of reach here. We hit on both of those players, and we hit hard. It wasn't even funny. My next one might be a little, not contentious, but I don't think it's going to be number 2 in a lot of people's books, if you will. I'm going with 2 trades together because they happened within hours of each other, where Garth Snow traded a second in 15-16 and a conditional third, although the conditions were never met. So a 2015 and a 2016 second rounder went to Boston for Johnny Boychuk, and then we sent Ken Simpson, TJ Brenny, Villa-Polka, and Anders Nilsson to Chicago for Nick Leddy, which, again, I don't need to paint the picture on how good of a trade this was for the Islanders. This completely revolutionized our back end at that time, right? This is, again, if you look back at the dates there, October 4th, just to remember here, this happened days before the season began. Days. before the NHL season began, and Garth Snow completely revitalized the Islanders back and gave them a top pair defense that we hadn't seen in decades. And they were good. Obviously, they were good for the money. Complementary type players, right? Nick Leddy, more offensive minded. Johnny Boychuk, more defensive minded, but can still throw up 30 points, says Johnny Boychuk, and still play on the power play. Whereas Nick Leddy could absolutely put up 50 points and lead the power play. It was an excellent trade. And all we gave up were futures, right? At the time, all we gave up were futures. That's it. There was no roster player moved in this trade. So right there, massive win for the New York Islanders. Now, when it gets to my little spreadsheet here, it gets a little trickier. I'll flip it there, where we earned 181 extra points, right? So that's already massive for us. The games played, though, maybe a little bit less. We lost something there. And that's because there's just the sheer number of players. Just by like sheer volume, we lost out here. Brendan Carlo was a huge get for the Boston Bruins with that 2015 second round pick. Ryan Lindgren never played for the Boston Bruins. So this is where it kind of gets tricky, as I was explaining earlier with the Bo thing. It gets tricky because Ryan Lindgren has never played for the Boston Bruins. They sent him over to the New York Rangers, where he has played 333 games and scored 80 points. Now, does that count? It's hard to say. I didn't want to get into a lot of this arithmetic of like, this counts and that doesn't. So I just say, you know what, just lump it together. And then you have a bunch of goalies here with Kent Simpson and Anders Nilsson. Obviously, they don't have any production to speak of. So these are just their goalie numbers, save percentage and goals against average. So for Kent Simpson, not missing much there. Anders Nilsson, a little bit. The goal against average is quite low, which is nice. But he's never going to be anything more than what we've seen him as a backup. So technically, we lose the games played here by 180 games played. Now, Nick Leddy is still playing in the NHL, right? He's still a serviceable NHL defenseman. So I didn't count those. I just looked at what we got. So just looking at that from these two players, and Johnny Boychuk's career was ended early because of a skate to the eye. So do with that what you will. We obviously still win this trade, just in terms of what it did for this team and how it boosted other players. It allowed us to push players further down the lineup where they were better suited, rather than higher up in the lineup where they were maybe out of their depth. Whereas these players stepped in and filled that role admirably. So in that alone, we win. Now, the games played, of course, sure, we lost that. But not really. Because like Nick Leddy has played, certainly in and of himself, more than 180 games there since he left the Islanders. And Johnny Boychuk, again, career cut early, maybe at least a season early. So he could have got another, let's say, 50 games. This would have been a lot closer than what we're seeing. So on paper, I'm still chalking this up as a win. Obviously, it's my second best trade. But when you dig down to the numbers a little bit deeper, it's maybe not as close of a win as you would expect, mainly because of Brendan Carlo. That's the big thing there. For my third trade, it's probably, again, not something that most of you are going to immediately list in your top five. Like if I asked you at a bar, what are the 5 best trades that Garth Snow ever made as a New York Islanders GM? Number 3 probably isn't coming up for you. Probably not, but maybe. I'll give some of you benefit of doubt. Jaroslav Halak. We sent a 4th round pick over to the Washington Capitals to get Jaroslav Halak. And like, I'll show you the spreadsheet here in a second. Halak's numbers for us were still pretty darn good, right? He did make an all-star game, mind you. So with that 4th round pick, technically, there's an asterisk there, and I'll get to that a little bit later at the end of my spiel here. The Capitals draft Nathan Walker, who has played 156 games in the NHL, though not for the Caps. Sorry. Yes, for the Caps. He has played 156 games at the NHL, has scored 40 points. Obviously, Jaroslav Halak doesn't really score points. I think he has 3 in his career as an Islander, obviously all assists. But we still win the games played differential. He played 177. Probably could have played more if Garth Snow didn't carry 3 goalies for no reason whatsoever. But look at those numbers, 913 and a 269. The thing with the Islanders at this time, as you are probably well aware, is they didn't have a starting goalie. They were just rotating random guys, whoever they can find, basically, to play a couple of games in the net. And I'm being maybe a little bit harsh with the words here, but you all remember that time where it's just we didn't have a starter, a guy where you're saying you're the 1A goalie, you're going to start 40 to 60 games every year. We had that with Jaroslav Halak and played very well. Again, 913 into 269. So by that alone, it fills a void in the roster. Just on that alone, and a massive void, right? Starting goalie is huge. Garth Snow knows that. He's a goalie. That in and of itself is why I'm putting this in my top 3 even. It could have even been top 2 just of how well he played before it all kind of fell apart, which I would refer back to Garth Snow, who kind of did that to himself. But I'm going to go back to my spreadsheet here because you're going to notice the asterisk here for Nathan Walker. And it's a funny story. So we sent a 4th round pick over to the Washington Capitals for Jaroslav Halak, right? Nathan Walker was not a 4th round pick. He was a 3rd round pick. The Washington Capitals traded back for the New York Rangers. Sorry, they traded up with the New York Rangers. They sent 2 4th round picks to the New York Rangers so they could move up to make this draft pick. And with those 2 4th round picks, the New York Rangers drafted Ryan Mantha, whatever, and Igor Shesterkin. Eesh, Washington. Eesh. He sent them Igor Shesterkin so you can draft Nathan Walker. Not a pretty situation for the Islanders. And also, maybe not great. Sorry, not a pretty situation for the Capitals. You can maybe flip that to the Islanders as well and say, like, well, they did control the pick for Igor Shesterkin and they didn't draft him. True, but they filled the void of getting a starter now. Whereas Igor Shesterkin didn't make the league till, if he's drafted in 2014, he didn't make it till 6 years later. Come on, maybe even longer. Relax, it's fine. We won this trade. Yes, we probably could have had Igor Shesterkin, but we still have Ilya Sorokin, so it's fine. My number 4, this one certainly is going to come up with, I would say most of the fan base when it comes to the top 5 trades made by Garth Snow. And my number 4 is the Travis Hamonic trade. Now, we sent Travis Hamonic and a conditional 4th round pick, and I don't believe that the conditions were hit on that 4th round pick. We received a 1st round pick in 2018, which we used to draft Noah Dobson. We get a 2018 2nd round pick, which we used to draft Ruslan Ishakov, and a 2019 conditional 2nd round pick, which did hit, which we used to draft Samuel Boychuk. Now, I think, again, right away, you're going to say, like, sounds like we won that trade, Mitch. And yeah, of course. Of course we won that trade. No disrespect to Travis Hamonic, who was a very fine player for the New York Islanders. And we did him a solid. He did us a solid by taking away his trade request. Either way, solids were done on both sides. But we still won this trade, clearly. The Calgary Flames, when they made this trade, were hoping to get a top 4 defenseman that were going to allow them to push forward and maybe not contend for Stanley Cup. Like, he's not the final piece Butch Goring type of trade, but he was a piece to help them move forward in terms of competing for a cup. That didn't happen, obviously, because we draft 12th overall with Noah Dobson in 2018. And so when you look at the little sheet that I drew up, we're already well ahead in the points department. Noah Dobson already nearly 200 points on the board in his very young NHL career. Ishakov, point per game player, 1 point in 1 game. And Samuel Boychuk, maybe not so prolific there in terms of scoring, but maybe he's just not an NHLer. 8 points in 51 games. Now, we still haven't won the games played here. We're 28 games back. But Travis Hamonic, I don't know if he's going to get another deal in the NHL this season, unless he actually has a contract that I don't remember. But he's at 397 games. Even if he plays in the NHL, he's not playing a full season this year or next year. Or it's just his career is coming to an end, if it has not ended yet. And Noah Dobson is just on the ascension of 317 games. He's probably going to pass. If he plays a full year, he's going to pass Travis Hamonic just barely this season alone. And that's not even considering Samuel Boychuk and maybe Ruslan Ishakov, although by the sounds of it, not yet official at the time of recording, he is signed with CSKA Moscow. But even take Rusnishnikov out of the equation, we're going to win the games played differential. We've already won the points differential. It's a clear win for the Islanders here. Travis Hamonic got his trade. We got what we wanted. It's a win-win, baby. And my number 5, I'm sure, is something that people are going to mention. It's another Peter Chiarelli screamer here. Although when you look at the numbers, screamers may be putting it in a blue and orange light, if you will. So the trade I'm referencing here is Jordan Eberle straight up for Ryan Strome, which, remember, at the time, Ryan Strome was just not performing for the Islanders. We thought we had a top 6 winger, maybe even a top 6 center. He had that 50-point season once and then never again, and didn't even look close to doing it. Jack Capuano really ran him into the ground, clearly. So we sent him for Jordan Eberle, who became the winger on Matthew Barzal's wing, the number 1 Gary, if you will, and really did some good things with the Islanders. When you look at the spreadsheet here, we're in the negative on both. Now, the point differential here, remember, Jordan Eberle has still played like 3 seasons with the Seattle Kraken and had some pretty good years. This is only his time with the New York Islanders. While for Ryan Strome, that is not only his time with the Edmonton Oilers. I'm still counting his time with the New York Rangers, where he played with Artemi Panarin, which is, I believe, when I did the math, it's like 75% of the production and time here is New York Rangers time. And then there's also the time he's spending with the Anaheim Ducks. So this number is still going up where this number is not. So it looks like we're losing this trade, but we really didn't. We turned a middle 6 player into a top 6 player and didn't have to pay top 6 price. Why? I don't know. And that was the big steal here, is that Garth Snow fleeced Peter Chiarelli again with this trade, because we got so much extra value out of it. Because we weren't getting we weren't getting enough from Ryan Strome, and we translated that into a guy who can play, not only just keep up with Matthew Barzal, but really create that kind of chemistry that hadn't existed previously, and allowed Matthew Barzal to grow into, I'm going to say leader, but I don't mean that by wearing a C or an A. I mean that in terms of like taking the team on his back. Allowed him to grow into that role a little bit more comfortably, a little bit more quickly than would have been otherwise. So there's a lot of sentimental value, I'm going to say, in this trade. But the fact that we're not getting killed in the points differential, if you take away the Rangers, just the Rangers, his time with the Rangers, is huge. Remember, he went to the Oilers, spent basically 2 years there, and did not a whole lot. You know what? Let me just bring it up, just to put it into perspective here. With the Edmonton Oilers, he spent 100 games and scored 36 points. So if we're just going to do this, 136, wow, see, look how those numbers flip. Plus 133 point differential, plus 172 games played differential. We win that trade, and it's not even funny. And so that's the top 5 trades I had for Garth Snow. Maybe you have a different order or different trades altogether. Let me know in the comments below. Thank you for watching. Thank you for following, and we'll see you soon.